The German invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, is broadly recognized as the opening blow of the Second World War, though it began, at its core, as a conflict between neighboring states. The Polish Second Republic had declared independence in 1918, with its western borders drawn under the Treaty of Versailles. Sporadic armed clashes in certain former German territories continued until 1921. Poland's eastern frontiers, meanwhile, were only finalized after a grueling war against Soviet Russia, which also concluded that same year. Neither Germany nor the Soviet Union accepted the new arrangement. Both powers viewed the Polish state as an illegitimate product of the Versailles settlement, a settlement each deeply resented, and both harbored territorial ambitions directed at Polish land. Despite this, Warsaw signed non-aggression agreements with Moscow in 1932 and with Berlin in 1934, constructing a fragile balance that concealed the true intentions of its powerful neighbors. Adolf Hitler had long considered eastward expansion essential to securing Lebensraum living space for the German people, and he was eager to reclaim territories surrendered to Poland in 1919. Stalin's motivations remain debated. Some historians argue he sought to reconquer lands of the former Tsarist Empire. Others contend he wanted to push Soviet borders westward for defensive reasons, or simply that he was ready to seize any available opportunity for territorial gain. In any case, the Soviet regime regarded Poles as adversaries, and ethnic Poles inside the USSR were deliberately targeted during the Great Terror of 1937-1938. In 1938, Nazi Germany absorbed part of Czechoslovakia following the Munich Agreement, and Poland claimed a small slice of Czech territory with German approval. Warsaw had long viewed the USSR as its most probable enemy, but after Munich, Germany turned its attention toward Poland. Foreign Minister Ribbentrop pressed for resolution to what he called the German-Polish question, which included demands over the free city of Danzig, technically governed by the League of Nations but administered by Poland. The semi-authoritarian Polish government looked to France and Britain for guarantees, and both countries pledged their support if Germany attacked. By summer 1939, war felt nearly inevitable to Polish military commander Marshal Edward Ryd-Śmigły, who declared that Poland would resist German annexation, even if forced to stand entirely alone. Hitler doubted that Britain and France would honor their commitments, yet he was unwilling to risk a two-front war. His solution was to approach the Soviets. Though the Nazis and Soviets stood at opposite ideological extremes and had long regarded each other with contempt, they shared a fundamental goal: dismantling the existing European order and expanding their respective empires. On August 23, 1939, the two powers shocked the continent by signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. A secret annex divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Germany was free to act in Western Poland and former Czechoslovakia, while the Soviet Union was granted latitude over Finland, the Baltic states, Eastern Poland, and Bessarabia. With diplomatic groundwork in place, Germany moved to manufacture a justification for war. In late August, SS operatives staged fabricated border incidents, most notably attacking a radio station at Gliwice while dressed in Polish uniforms. Concentration camp prisoners were killed on site and photographed as supposed evidence of Polish aggression. Despite many of these operations failing to proceed as planned, the manufactured pretext served its purpose. The German operational plan envisioned a pincer attack from north and south. Two army groups would close off the Danzig corridor and sweep toward Warsaw, while southern armies advanced on the capital and eastward toward Lwów. Germany assembled roughly 1.5 million men, 3,200 armored vehicles, and 2,000 aircraft. Of approximately 2,000 tanks, the majority were lighter Panzer I and II models. Only around 300 were the more capable Panzer III and IV types. Facing this force, Poland fielded around 1 million troops, roughly 1,100 armored vehicles, almost all light or obsolete, and approximately 750 aircraft, most of them older designs. At the urging of France and Britain, Poland had delayed full mobilization to avoid provoking Germany. As a result, only about half of Polish units had reached their designated positions when the invasion began. At dawn on September 1st, Hitler falsely accused Poland of firing across the German frontier and announced that Germany was, quote, returning fire. Armored spearheads drove deep into Polish territory, punching through defensive lines and encircling slower infantry formations. Stuka dive bombers struck troop positions, supply lines and communication centers to paralyze command structures. Conventional bombers hit cities not only for tactical effect but to break civilian morale. Polish units fought fiercely despite the odds. A cavalry division held up German armor at Mokra. At Krojanty, an engagement between Polish lancers and a German infantry column gave birth to a lasting myth. An Italian war correspondent published a sensationalized account portraying cavalry charging blindly into tanks, a fabricated narrative that became propaganda fuel across Germany and much of the world. German forces captured Krakow without a fight on September 6th, and by September 8th, their forward units had reached the outskirts of Warsaw. On September 9th, a large Polish pocket west of Warsaw launched a major counteroffensive at the Battle of the Bzura, the most intense fighting of the entire campaign. Although some Polish units managed to slip through to the capital, relentless German air and ground pressure crushed the pocket within roughly a week. By September 15th, Warsaw was completely surrounded. On September 3rd, Britain and France declared war on Germany, greeted with jubilation by many Poles who saw it as their best hope for survival. However, the promised French offensive on Germany's western front was not scheduled for another 2 weeks, and when it finally came, it amounted to a brief, shallow probe before French forces withdrew to the Maginot Line. Then, on September 17th, the Soviet Union entered the war on Germany's side. To provide cover for what was plainly an act of aggression, Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov handed the Polish ambassador a note claiming that since the Polish state had effectively ceased to exist, the USSR was obliged to protect Ukrainians and Belarusians on Polish soil, even though the Polish government and military were still actively functioning and resisting. 2 Red Army fronts totaling approximately 470,000 men, supported by 4,000 tanks and 2,000 aircraft, crossed the eastern border. Many Poles were caught entirely off guard. Some, recalling Soviet propaganda framing the intervention as fraternal assistance, initially wondered whether the Red Army had arrived to help fight the Germans. Some local populations, Ukrainians, Belarusians, and segments of the Jewish community, did welcome the Soviets, hoping for better treatment than they had received under Polish rule. Armed resistance was scattered, but determined in places. At Grodno, Polish troops held off Soviet tanks for 2 days using Molotov cocktails and machine guns. On September 22nd, in a visible demonstration of partnership, German and Soviet forces held a joint military parade in Brest-Litovsk, with victory arches displaying both swastikas and red stars. General Heinz Guderian and Soviet General Semyon Krivoshein looked on together, conversing in French. As the two occupying armies consolidated control, they moved swiftly to establish terror regimes in their respective zones. The Nazi leadership regarded Slavic Poles and Polish Jews, roughly 10% of the population, as racially inferior people to be enslaved, expelled, or eliminated. SS Commander Reinhard Heydrich ordered the immediate liquidation of Polish elites, clergy, nobility, and Jews, without legal proceedings. Special Einsatzgruppen units carried out mass executions of Jews and intellectuals. Wehrmacht units also killed Polish prisoners and civilians. In the town of Czestochowa, troops massacred roughly 1,000 civilians on fabricated grounds. Across the campaign, German forces executed between 12,000 and 15,000 Polish civilians in summary killings, not counting aerial bombardment casualties. On October 4th, Hitler issued an amnesty for any German who had committed war crimes in Poland. The Soviets, for their part, shot or imprisoned Polish officers, landowners, civil servants, and community leaders, deporting great numbers to camps deep inside the Soviet Union. Inside Warsaw, a garrison of 180,000 defenders, low on ammunition and heavy weapons, used rubble and street barricades to blunt German assaults. The Luftwaffe hammered the city with particular ferocity, targeting power stations, the water system, and the electrical grid. September 25th saw the most intense single aerial bombardment in history up to that point, with 370 aircraft dropping incendiary ordnance to ignite massive fires across the city. The bombing campaign killed approximately 40,000 Warsaw residents. Warsaw's mayor, Stefan Starzyński, broadcast desperate radio appeals to France and Britain, appeals that, by late September, had shifted in tone from pleading to outright defiance. The siege nonetheless had to end. Acute water shortages and the hopeless strategic situation forced the Polish garrison to surrender on September 28th. The last organized pocket at Koch held out until October 6th, bringing formal Polish military resistance to a close. German losses amounted to approximately 15,000 dead, 30,000 wounded, and 217 tanks destroyed. The Red Army suffered around 750 killed and 1,800 wounded. Polish losses were catastrophically higher, between 70,000 and 120,000 soldiers killed, 130,000 wounded, some 700,000 taken prisoner by Germany, and a further 220,000 captured by the Soviets. Between 100,000 and 200,000 Polish civilians lost their lives. Stalin would later remark that the new German-Soviet partnership had been sealed in blood. The swiftness of the German victory was heavily exploited by Nazi propagandists to cement the mythology of Blitzkrieg as a premeditated, masterfully coordinated doctrine. In reality, the German High Command believed its forces had been pushed into war before they were properly prepared. As devastating as the 5-week invasion had been, The horrors of the occupation that followed, under both German and Soviet administration, would prove far worse still.